"You're going to die out here," she said, "all of you, unless you come inside right now." She was 8 years old. She weighed maybe 50 pounds. And she was the only thing standing between 6 grown men and a blizzard that had already decided to kill them. If you've ever wondered what real courage looks like, it doesn't wear a leather vest. Sometimes it wears a threadbare coat 2 sizes too small and holds a candle in a storm. Subscribe to our channel and follow this story all the way to the end. Drop a comment telling us what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The wind didn't blow that night. It attacked. Ryder Callahan felt it hit him like a fist to the sternum, the kind of cold that doesn't just steal your warmth, it reaches inside and starts dismantling you from the core outward. He'd ridden through 43 winters. He'd crossed the Rockies in October, sleet, pushed through Nebraska, tornado warnings with nothing but nerve and throttle. He'd never once pulled over and admitted the road had beaten him. He pulled over. "Church!" he shouted into the white wall where his crew had been riding 30 seconds ago. The word came out and died immediately, swallowed whole by the blizzard. "Church, where are you?" A shape materialized on his left. Danny Church Kowalski, his road captain, stumbled forward with his arm locked over his face like he was trying to fistfight the wind. Behind him came Marco Reyes, then Big Earl Donahue, then the 2 prospects, Tommy Briggs and Jake Nails Calloway, all of them lurching through the snow like men walking through wet concrete. 6 of them. 6 men who between them had survived bar fights, prison yards, rival club ambushes, and enough miles of American highway to circle the earth twice. And right now, not a single one of them could feel his hands. What happened? Church had to press his mouth directly against Ryder's ear to be heard. "The GPS is dead. Both phones are dead. The emergency radio isn't picking up anything." "Gear's compromised," Ryder said. He already knew it. He'd known it for the last 40 minutes since the moment everything electronic they had went dark inside of 10 minutes. Too systematic, too complete to be coincidence. Somebody had gotten to their equipment before they left the last stop. He'd think about who and why later. Right now, later was a luxury he wasn't sure they had. "How far back was that junction?" Marco called out, his voice shredded by the gust. 3 miles, maybe 4. "We can't make 3 miles in this." Ryder knew that too. The temperature had been dropping since mid-afternoon, and up here in the San Juan range of Colorado, a November blizzard wasn't a weather event, it was a reckoning. The snow was past his boot tops now. Big Earl, who was 6'4" and built like a refrigerator, someone had taught to throw punches, was hugging himself and shaking. When Earl shook, you listened. "We keep moving," Ryder said. "Moving where?" Tommy Briggs, the younger prospect, had a raw edge in his voice that Ryder didn't hold against him. The kid was 22. This was the first time he'd seen the man he'd pledged to follow look genuinely uncertain. "Away from stopped," Ryder said. "Stopped is dead. Pick a direction and keep your feet moving." They moved. Or they tried to. The wind made every step cost twice what it should have, and the snow was the wet, heavy kind that stuck to leather and added weight with every yard. Ryder couldn't feel his toes inside his boots. He could feel his ears, which was worse. They burned with a specific nasty intensity that he knew from experience was the early stage of frostbite introducing itself. Church grabbed his arm. "Ryder, I see it." He didn't see it so much as perceive it, a faint amber smear in the white dark ahead. Not strong enough to be a building, not moving enough to be a vehicle. Just a small, stubborn warmth holding on against everything the storm was throwing at it. "Could be anything," Marco said. "Could be shelter," Church said. Ryder was already moving toward it. The closer they got, the more it resolved a window. A single small window with something burning behind it, the light jumping and inconsistent. A candle maybe, or a kerosene lamp. The structure around it was low and dark, and Ryder's first thought was abandon. His second thought was, it has 4 walls and a roof which put it ahead of everything else available. He reached the door first. It was wood rough cut with a rope handle instead of a knob. He grabbed the rope and pulled. The door opened 6 inches and stopped. "Hello," Ryder put his face to the gap. The warmth that hit him was modest, barely above the temperature in his lungs right now, but it was real and his body registered it like a man dying of thirst. Registers the smell of water. "Anybody in there? We need help. We've got injured men." Nobody was injured yet exactly, but they were 4 minutes from it. Silence from inside. Then a sound, something scraping across the floor. Something being dragged away from the door. The door swung open. She was standing in the middle of the doorway with the candle held up at shoulder height, and for a half second, Ryder Callahan, who had stared down men with weapons and bad intentions for 25 years, was completely frozen. She was a child, 8 years old maybe. Small even for that, the kind of small that comes from not having enough from stretching meals and wearing coats that don't quite fit, and sleeping under everything you own because the heat doesn't work. She had dark hair plastered to her forehead, pale skin, and eyes the color of winter creek water, gray-green and absolutely clear, and looking at him with an assessment that was startlingly adult. She looked at him. She looked past him at the 5 other large frost-covered, leather-clad men barely standing in the blizzard. She looked back at him. "You're going to die out here," she said. "All of you, unless you come inside right now." Ryder opened his mouth. She was already stepping back. "I don't have much room, and I'm going to need 2 of you to carry more wood from the back. Can you do that?" "Yeah," Ryder said, because it was the only word he had. "Yeah, we can do that." "Then come in, hurry. You're letting the cold in." They came in. The inside of the shack was not much. Ryder took it in fast, one room roughly 15 by 20 feet, with a plank floor and walls that had been insulated in ways both creative and desperate. Old blankets, flattened cardboard, what looked like pages from magazines layered and pinned. In the center of the room was a small iron stove, the source of what warmth existed, though it was clearly burning low. Against the far wall was a cot with a sleeping bag on it. Near the stove was a small wooden chair and a crate being used as a table. On the crate was the candle and a single tin cup. That was it. That was the whole inventory of this child's life. Church looked at him. Ryder looked at Church. Neither of them said anything. "The wood is through the back," the girl said. She pointed to a low door Ryder had missed, more of a hatch, really leading to what he guessed was a lean-to attached to the back wall. "There should be some dry pieces in the far corner. Maybe enough. Bring all of it." Big Earl was already moving, cramming his enormous frame through the low hatch with surprising urgency. Tommy followed him. "What's your name?" Ryder asked. "Emily Carter." She was already crouching in front of the stove, opening the small iron door with a cloth around her hand because she didn't have gloves. "What happened to you?" "Storm caught us wrong," Ryder said. He unzipped his leather vest. The layers underneath were soaked through and started wringing what water he could out of his gloves. "Our navigation equipment failed." "Failed how?" The question was direct and without softening, the way a child asks things when they haven't learned yet to soften questions for the comfort of adults. Ryder looked at her sideways. "Somebody may have messed with it before we left." Emily turned her head and looked at him with those clear creek water eyes. "You have enemies. I have people who'd like to see me not arrive somewhere." She nodded once as if this was a kind of information she already knew how to process. "Okay," she said, and turned back to the stove. Earl and Tommy came back through the hatch, carrying armloads of wood, their breath coming in hard bursts. Emily took the first piece without ceremony and fed it into the stove. "Close it." She nodded at the hatch. "You're pulling cold air." Tommy pulled it shut. The fire began to recover almost immediately, the crackle deepening, the iron sides of the stove ticking as they expanded. Marco and Jake had their backs against one wall, side by side, rubbing their hands together in slow mechanical motions. Church was sitting on the floor with his knees up and his head back, eyes closed. Ryder stood because sitting felt too much like giving up on something, though he wasn't sure what. "How long have you been out here?" he asked Emily. She was adding a second piece of wood, judging its size before placing it with care. "Since April." Ryder didn't say anything right away. April was 7 months ago. "Lone," he said. "Since June." She closed the stove door. "My dad went to get help. He didn't come back." She said it the way you say it when you have already done all the crying available to you for that particular fact, and now it lives in you like a stone, heavy, permanent, no longer sharp. "And before June, my mom died in April. That's why my dad went for help. There was nobody to call." She stood up and wiped her hands on her jeans. "Are any of you hurt? Like actually hurt, not just cold?" "Church might have the start of frostbite on his fingers," Ryder said. "The big guy Earl, I'm worried about his ears." "Okay." She moved to the crate beside her cot and opened the small wooden box sitting on top of it. Inside was a first aid kit. The drugstore came in red plastic, the kind that costs $4 and has 20 bandages and a pamphlet. She'd supplemented it. Ryder could see small plastic bags of things labeled in a child's block handwriting. Dried herbs, some kind of salve in a jar, a folded cloth. "Where did you get that stuff?" he asked. "I learned." She brought it over and crouched in front of Church, taking his hands and turning them over with the same matter-of-fact efficiency. "There's a book," she said, "about plants. It was my mom's. I've read it a lot." She looked at Church's fingertips, white, slightly waxy. "These aren't frostbitten yet. They will be if you go back outside." She looked up at Church's face. "Don't go back outside." Church, who had a reputation in 4 states for not taking direction from anyone who hadn't earned it in blood or years, said, "Yes, ma'am." Marco made a sound that was almost a laugh. It died fast, but it had been there. Emily stood and moved to Big Earl, who had to bend almost in half for her to reach his ears. She examined them briefly, then applied something from one of the small jars, her small fingers moving with confidence. Earl sat completely still. This was remarkable given that Earl did not typically sit still for anything short of a direct order from Ryder. "You're going to be okay," she told Earl. "Thank you, little miss," Earl said. She didn't correct the name. She moved on to the next man. Ryder watched her work her way around the room, this 8-year-old girl who had been alone in a mountain shack since June, who had survived a Colorado summer and fall by herself, who had read her dead mother's plant book until she knew it well enough to treat frostbite. Something was happening in his chest that he didn't have a name for immediately and that he wasn't entirely comfortable with. He hadn't cried since his mother's funeral 20 years ago, and he wasn't going to start now. But whatever the feeling was, it was sitting right next to the place where that kind of thing happened. He moved to the back wall and crouched there, partly to be useful and partly to get a hold of himself. "You've been eating," he said. "Well enough." It was a careful answer, the kind of answer that means no, but means it with dignity. "How well enough?" She finished with Jake and stood up, tucking the jar back into the wooden box. "I have 7 cans left," she said. "I had 12 in October, but a raccoon got into the lean-to. I've been going slower since then." 7 cans. For a mountain winter that hadn't even really started. "What's in the cans?" Ryder asked. She looked at him steadily. 1 soup, 1 corn, 2 beans, 1 peaches, 2 tomatoes. She paused. "I was going to make the soup tonight anyway. I can share it." She said it straightforwardly without performance. No "look how generous I am," just a plain statement of what she was going to do. Church had opened his eyes. Marco had stopped rubbing his hands. Earl was looking at the floor. "Emily," Ryder said carefully, "that soup is yours." "There are 6 of you," she said. "You're bigger than me, and you've been outside longer. You need it more right now." She picked up the tin can from the shelf above the stove and held it out like it was settled. "Do any of you know how to use a can opener?" Jake made a sound. He covered it with a cough that didn't fool anyone. Church stood up, took the can from her with both hands, like it was something he needed to handle carefully, and said quietly, "I got it." She found a small pot somewhere. Ryder didn't see where, and Church opened the can and poured it in and set it on top of the stove, and nobody said anything for a while. The fire had recovered enough that warmth was actually moving through the room now, slow and deliberate, pushing back against the cold in the walls. Outside, the blizzard had no opinion about any of this. It continued at full intensity, wind driving snow against the thin walls, the whole structure groaning at intervals. The soup heated. Emily sat on the floor near the stove with her knees pulled to her chest and watched it with the patience of someone accustomed to watching things slowly become what they need to be. "Who owned this land before?" Ryder asked. It wasn't an idle question. Something had been turning in the back of his mind since he walked through that door. "My parents," Emily said. "Their names are on the deed. Mom kept it in a metal box under the floor." She tilted her head. "Why?" "Because I'm trying to understand your situation." "My situation is that I'm alone and it's winter," she said without bitterness, without self-pity, with just the flat accuracy of a child who has learned that facts are facts, and feeling bad about them costs energy you don't have, and that I had 6 unexpected visitors tonight. 7 unexpected visitors, Marco said from the wall. "Don't forget the blizzard." She looked at him and something shifted at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile, the memory of one. Ryder filed that away. If this kid could still find the edge of a smile after 7 months alone, she wasn't broken. She was something else, something he didn't have a word for yet, but recognized. The soup was ready. Emily found 2 tin cups and a bowl, and Church portioned it out across all 7 of them, in amounts so small they were more gesture than sustenance. And they passed the containers around and drank from them, and every single person in that room was quiet. "This is good," Tommy said. "It's tomato soup from a can," Emily said. "Mm-hmm." "Yeah," Tommy said, "it's still good." She looked at him for a moment, and this time the not-quite smile was a little more. Ryder drank his portion, 3 swallows, maybe 4, and held the warm tin between his palms while he thought. The feeling in his fingers was returning, which meant the pain was returning, which was actually the good sign. Pain meant circulation. Circulation meant he still had fingers. He cataloged his crew. Church was sitting against the wall with his eyes open and color coming back. Marco had stopped shaking. Earl was enormous and still, which was his version of recovering. Tommy and Jake were young and tough, and they'd be fine. 6 men who should have died out there. 6 men sitting in a child's living space eating her food. He looked at Emily, who had taken her small portion last and was sipping it with the careful deliberation of someone who had learned to make small amounts last. "You said your mom kept the deed in a metal box," Ryder said. "Under the 3rd plank from the left of the stove," Emily said. "I've checked it a lot to make sure it's still there." "Why would you worry about it not being there?" She looked at him with those clear eyes. "Because men have come," she said, "before the snow got too bad. Men in trucks. They walked around the land and they took pictures and they wrote things in notebooks. And one of them, the one in the suit, not the work clothes, he came to the door." Her jaw set in a way that looked inherited the stubbornness of someone who had watched their parents do it. "He told me the land didn't belong to my family anymore, that there was paperwork. He wanted me to show him where I'd been sleeping so I could pack my things." Ryder was very still. "What did you tell him?" "I told him to get off my family's property," Emily said. "And I shut the door." Church looked at Ryder. Ryder looked at the stove. "How old did he look, the one in the suit?" "I don't know. Old, maybe 60. "Did he give you a name?" Emily shook her head. "Did he come back?" "Once," she said. "He brought another man that time. The second man was wearing a uniform, like a deputy's uniform. And he was the one talking then, not the suit. He said they were going to come back with papers." She set her tin cup down. "I didn't let them in." Outside, the blizzard shook the walls. The fire ticked and breathed. Ryder sat with the information settling into him and tried to calculate what he was looking at: an 8-year-old girl alone on a piece of land somebody wanted, with no family, no phone, no way to call for help, and 2 grown men who'd already come to the door once with legal language and a uniform. He looked at the hatch in the back wall. He looked at the small wooden box with the first aid supplies. He looked at the 3rd plank from the left of the stove. "Emily," he said, "we're not going anywhere until this storm passes." He paused. "And I don't think those men are going to like what happens next time they come to your door." She looked at him carefully. "What does that mean?" Ryder put the empty tin cup down on the floor beside him and let his hands rest on his knees. "It means," he said, "that you saved our lives tonight, all 6 of us. And that's not something we forget." The fire burned. The storm pressed. Emily Carter looked at the largest, most road-worn, most quietly furious man she had ever seen, and for the first time in 7 months, something behind her eyes relaxed by a fraction. Just a fraction, the way a door opens 1 inch before someone decides whether to open it all the way. She didn't say anything. She picked up her cup and finished the last of her soup. Outside, the snow piled against the only door between her and everything that wanted to take what little she had left. But for the first time since June, she wasn't facing it alone. Nobody slept much. The storm didn't permit it. Every hour or so, the wind would find a new angle on the shack and hit it from there, and the whole structure would shudder like something alive trying to hold itself together by will alone. The fire needed feeding every 40 minutes. Emily had explained this before she finally lay down on her cot, tucked under the sleeping bag with her coat still on, and the men took turns without being asked, passing their responsibility around in the dark like a watch rotation. Ryder didn't sleep at all. He sat with his back against the wall nearest the stove and listened to the blizzard work and thought about sabotaged equipment and men in suits and a deputy with paperwork. Church settled in beside him sometime past midnight, close enough to talk without waking the others. "She's been out here since June," Church said. Not a question. He'd been turning it over the same way Ryder had. June, Ryder confirmed. Alone. Alone. Church was quiet for a moment. Outside, something, a branch maybe, or a piece of something, torn loose, hit the wall hard enough to make Tommy jerk awake on the other side of the room. Tommy looked around, registered the situation, and then lay back down. The men who came, Church said. The suit and the deputy. Yeah, that's not a one-time thing. That's a campaign. That's what I'm thinking. Church pulled his knees up and rested his forearms across them. An 8-year-old girl on a piece of land somebody wants bad enough to send a deputy to intimidate her. In November. The suit came before the snow got heavy. He knew the window was closing. Ryder turned his head toward the third plank from the left of the stove. He wanted her out before winter locked her in. Locked her in, Church repeated quietly, or locked her out. That landed between them, and neither man touched it for a while. Ryder had been in enough situations in his life to recognize the specific shape of premeditated cruelty, the way it organized itself, the way it moved in sequence, patient and systematic. What had been done to Emily Carter wasn't random. It was a plan, and plans had architects. He'd find out who. Emily woke before any of them. Ryder heard her moving and opened his eyes to find her already at the stove, adding wood with the quiet efficiency of someone for whom this was the first action of everyday no thought required. The gray light coming through the single window was the gray of very early morning. The storm had reduced its intensity. Overnight not stopped, just pulled back to a steady fall rather than the assault of the previous night. You don't have to do that, Ryder said. I know, she said without turning around. But if I don't, the fire goes cold and then it takes 20 minutes to get it back, and I don't like being cold in the morning. He sat up straight, his back objected strongly. He was 51 years old and he had spent the night on a plank floor, and his body had several detailed opinions about that. How do you do this every day, he said. She looked at him over her shoulder. What else would I do? It wasn't defiant. It wasn't even rhetorical. It was exactly what it sounded like, a genuine question from someone who genuinely didn't understand the alternative. He got to his feet and crossed to where she was. Let me do that. She stepped aside without argument, which told him she was tired even if she wouldn't say so, and went to the wooden crate and opened the box on top of it. He heard her counting quietly, checking the inventory she already knew by heart. How long do you think the storm will hold? Ryder asked. Today it'll slow down. Tomorrow may be clear. She paused in her counting. You'll be able to leave tomorrow if the temperature comes up. We're not leaving tomorrow. She turned around. Your bikes are out there, she said, in the storm. I know where my bikes are. I thought bikers were serious about their bikes. We're more serious about other things. He held her gaze for a moment. Sit down, Emily. Eat something. I'm not hungry yet. Sit down anyway. She sat, not because he'd told her to, he understood that immediately, but because she'd made the calculation that this was a moment to let someone else run the next few minutes, and she was choosing to allow it. That distinction mattered. This kid didn't do anything she hadn't decided to do. The others woke up gradually in the way that men wake up when they've slept badly and haven't had coffee, careful, slightly raw assessing. Marco stretched his back with a sound like a tree branch cracking and said something in Spanish under his breath. Big Earl sat up, looked at the ceiling, looked at Emily and said, Good morning, Miss Emily. She said good morning back to him in the same register, as if this were a routine they had established over years rather than hours. Tommy and Jake were up and moving before Ryder had to say anything, which was what he expected from them. The storm had knocked something real into them last night, and they were running on the practical instinct that comes after you've genuinely been scared. They found their way to the wood hatch and started bringing in more without being asked. Careful, Emily called toward them. The second stack on the left is wet. Don't bring those. How do you tell? Tommy called back. They're heavier, she said, and they smell different. Bring the ones from the right corner. Tommy's face appeared back through the hatch with an expression that Ryder recognized, the expression of a 22-year-old man who has just been instructed by someone one-third his age and is not sure what to do with that. He brought the right ones. Church had found a small bag of oatmeal on the shelf near the stove and was looking at it the way you look at someone else's groceries. Emily, is this for anything specific? It was going to be breakfast eventually, she said. Can I make it? She looked at him. You know how to make oatmeal on a wood stove? My grandmother had one, he said. I'm not completely useless in a kitchen. The pot's on the hook on the left side. She paused. There's not much water. The bucket out back should have some, but it might be frozen. Jake was already moving. I'll get it. The sound of the shack that morning was not what Ryder expected. It was not quiet or solemn. It was occupied, full in a way that the thin walls seemed to notice the way an old house changes character when there are people in every room. Church and Jake fussed with the oatmeal. Marco found a loose board in the back wall and spent 40 minutes locating a nail in his jacket pocket and tapping it back in with the heel of his boot. Earl sat with his long legs folded under him and talked to Emily in a low rumbling voice. And after a while, Emily was talking back, actually talking, not just answering. Ryder moved to where he could hear without making it a thing. My dad built most of it himself, Emily was telling Earl. He wasn't a carpenter. He said so. He said if you looked at the corners, you could tell. I've seen worse corners, Earl said. Have you built things? Some. Mostly I've torn things down. I was in demolition for a while. Emily considered this. That sounds easier. It is and it isn't, Earl said. The swinging is easy. The knowing what to swing at, that's harder. She absorbed that with the seriousness she gave everything. My dad worked at a mill. Before we came up here, he said he wanted land that was ours, that nobody could make decisions about. Earl nodded slowly. Smart man. He was, Emily said. And then he is. She corrected herself fast, but not fast enough. The slip, the catch, the way her jaw set after it. He went to get help. He could still be trying to get back. The room didn't change. Nobody moved or made a sound. But the quality of the silence shifted, became careful, became gentle, in the way that silence gets when everyone in a space is doing the work of holding something fragile from the outside. Earl said, yeah, he could. He didn't say more than that. And that was exactly right. Church put the oatmeal out in divided portions, small but warm, and for the second meal in a row, they ate what belonged to Emily Carter. Ryder noticed that Church had given her slightly more than the equal share. He noticed that Emily noticed and chose not to comment. They were finishing when Emily said, can I ask you something? Anything, Ryder said. What do you do? I know you ride motorcycles, but that's not what I mean. Her eyes moved across him with that assessment that kept catching him off guard. What do you actually do? He set his bowl down. We look out for people. Which people? People who need it. She thought about this. How do you decide who needs it? Usually it's obvious, he said. Usually you find out because someone's in trouble and the people who should be helping aren't. She was quiet for a moment, like a little girl alone on a mountain. Like that, Ryder said. Emily looked at the stove, looked at her hands. The man in the suit, she said, he said the land was going to be developed. He used that word, developed. She said it with a child's precise contempt for a word she'd identified as dishonest. He said it like I should be happy about it. Do you know what the land would be developed into? He said a resort. I had to look that word up. I found a dictionary on the shelf. She paused. It means a place where rich people go to feel like they're somewhere special. Marco snorted. Yeah, Ryder said. That's about right. My family's land, Emily said, is worth money to someone. A lot of money, Ryder said. He didn't see the point of softening it. She looked at him directly. And they thought they could just take it because I'm small. The word small, she said it like she'd been chewing on it for a long time and had finally decided to spit it out. They thought wrong, Ryder said. Church had been quiet for several minutes. Now he said Ryder. He said it in the tone that meant there's something you need to know and it's not going to wait. Ryder looked at him. Church tilted his head toward the front door. Emily, Ryder said, we need to step outside for 1 minute. It's cold, she said. I know. He pulled his coat on. Don't let the fire down. He and Church went out the front door and pulled it shut behind them. The storm had thinned to a steady, heavy snowfall, the wind reduced to something negotiable. Cold hit them immediately, but it was manageable cold, the kind that reminds you you're alive, rather than the kind that discusses ending that. Church said the equipment. What about it? I've been thinking about the timing. Church crossed his arms tight against the temperature. We were coming through this area on the way to the chapter meet in Durango. Same route we've taken for 3 years. Whoever got to our gear would have to know our route, our timeline, and had access to our bikes before we left Alamosa. Ryder had thought about it. He hadn't wanted to say it yet. Somebody local, he said. Somebody who didn't want us arriving in Durango and also knew we'd come through this stretch of road. Church paused. Or somebody who didn't want us passing through this specific area. That was the part Ryder had been sitting on. We're 2 miles from Emily's land, he said. I measured it in my head. About that. They couldn't have known we'd find her. No, Church said. They just wanted us dead in the storm. That was enough. He paused. They're clearing the board, Ryder. Anyone who might complicate what they're doing to that little girl's land, they're removing them. Ryder stood in the snow and felt something settle in his chest. It wasn't anger exactly. Anger was too hot and too small for what this was. This was something older and quieter and more absolute. The feeling he got when a line got crossed that he'd drawn 20 years ago about what he would and would not allow to happen in his presence. Get me everything you can remember about the suit she described, he said. Age build anything, she said. Already went over it twice in my head. Church recited 60-ish, suit not work clothes, so money or at least the performance of it. Came back with a deputy, not a sheriff, a deputy, which means local jurisdiction, not county-wide authority, had paperwork or said he did. A developer with local political cover, Ryder said, and enough juice to get a deputy to run his errands. Middle management corrupt, Church said. Not sophisticated, somebody who's done this before in smaller ways and thinks this is the same thing. He's wrong, Ryder said. They went back inside. Emily was where they'd left her, sitting near the stove, her hands wrapped around the tin cup with nothing in it, just holding the warmth the metal still carried. She watched them come back in and read the air between them with that uncanny efficiency of hers. You figured something out, she said. We're working on it, Ryder said. Tell me. He sat down across from her. He'd had the thought briefly of protecting her from the details, but she'd been out here 7 months. She'd opened the door to 2 men who came to take her land. She'd told them to leave and shut the door. She didn't need protecting from information. She needed information treated as the thing it was something that helped you decide. I think the people who want your land may have been the same people who messed with our equipment, he said. She didn't flinch. They wanted you dead. They wanted us gone, he said. Dead lost, it doesn't matter. Gone was the point. Why you weren't involved? We weren't yet, he said, but we were in the area, and maybe somebody got nervous. She thought about this. Or maybe they didn't know about you at all. Maybe they just didn't want anyone passing through who might find me. Ryder stopped. He had not thought of it from that angle. He looked at Church, who had the expression of a man recalibrating. They were isolating you, Church said slowly. Not just the weather. They were keeping people away from this road, making sure nobody stumbled onto the fact that a child was living out here alone. Emily said, if someone found me, someone might help me. The room was completely quiet. And if you had help, Ryder said, the land gets a lot harder to take. She nodded once, matter of fact. That's what I figured, she said. That's why I stopped going to the road when I heard cars. How long ago did you stop? When? In September, she said. After the second time they came. That was when it hit Ryder fully, not in pieces, but all at once, the complete picture of what had been done to this child. She'd been out here since June, and by September, she'd understood enough about her situation to go to ground to stop showing herself, to trust no one who came down that road. An 8-year-old girl who had taught herself to be invisible on her own land because she'd figured out the danger before any adult had shown up to explain it to her. Emily, Ryder said. His voice came out with an edge he hadn't intended, the controlled pressure of something that needed containing. I want you to listen to me. She looked at him steadily. You did everything right, he said. All of it, everything you did to survive, to protect yourself, to hold on to what's yours. You did it exactly right, but you don't have to do it alone anymore. You understand? She looked at him for a long moment. Something moved behind those creekwater eyes, something that had been locked down for a long time, pressurized by months of holding everything on its own. You don't know the whole situation yet, she said carefully. Then tell me. She got up and crossed to the stove. She went to the third plank from the left and worked it up with her fingers. It was loose at one end, a hinge made of a bent nail, and from the space beneath it, she lifted a metal box. She brought it to Ryder and set it in his hands. The box was old, scratched. It had been opened and closed many times in recent months. He could tell by the wear on the latch. Inside was a folded document, the deed he assumed, and beneath it a small collection of papers. He opened the deed first. It was legitimate. The land was registered to Daniel and Margaret Carter, filed in the county records, signed and notarized. Below the deed were the other papers, a letter handwritten, and beneath that 3 photographs. The letter was from Emily's father. It was addressed to Emily, and it was dated in late May, 2 weeks before he'd gone for help. Ryder read it once, then he read it again. He looked up at Emily. "Your father knew," he said, before he left. "He'd been watching them for 2 weeks," she said. "Men on the land with equipment." He wrote down what he saw. She pointed to the bottom of the letter. The names. Ryder looked. 2 names written in a man's careful handwriting. One of them he didn't recognize. The other one he had seen on a sign on the way through town, the sign outside the county office building, the name of the county official whose office it was, Fletcher Sterling. "Your father documented this," Church said from behind Ryder's shoulder. "He was going to the state," Emily said. "He said he was going to get someone who couldn't be paid by the same people. He said..." She stopped. "He said if he didn't come back, I should keep the box safe, that the box was proof." Ryder folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the box. He looked at the photographs, 3 of them taken with a disposable camera by the look of the print quality. Men on the land, one of them in a suit, one of them in a deputy's uniform. He closed the box. He held it in both hands for a moment, feeling the weight of it. It wasn't heavy. It was exactly as heavy as a metal box and some papers. But what it contained had gotten Emily's father to leave his daughter alone on a mountain in late May, and it had kept a little girl hiding from cars on a road for 3 months. "I'm going to make some calls," Ryder said, "when the storm gives us enough break to get signal." "Who are you calling?" Emily asked. "People," he said. "A lot of people." He looked at her. "And Emily, I need you to trust me with this box. Not to give it to me, to trust me with it. There's a difference. You keep it. You know where it is, but I need to know what's in it so I can make the right calls." She looked at the box in his hands. She looked at him. "You came in out of the storm," she said slowly. "I didn't know you. You could have been anybody." "Yeah, but I let you in anyway." "You did." She was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think that's called trusting your instincts." "That's exactly what it's called," Ryder said. She reached out and took the box back from him, crossed to the floor hatch, and tucked it back into its space beneath the plank. She replaced the board, pressed it flat, and stood up. "Okay," she said. "Make your calls." Outside, the storm continued to pull back by degrees, the snow thinning, the wind dropping its shoulder. By afternoon, pale light was pressing through the clouds. By evening, the first stars appeared in a gap to the northwest, hard and cold and absolutely clear. Ryder stood in the doorway of the shack with his phone in his hand, signal, finally one bar that appeared and held, and he looked at the contact he'd pulled up. He stood there for a moment before pressing call. Not because he was uncertain, because he understood that what happened next was not a small thing. It was not a simple call. It was the first stone dropped into a lake, and he could already see the ripples spreading outward in every direction, fast and unstoppable. He pressed call. It rang twice, then a voice, gravel and road and 30 years of everything that mattered. "Ryder, where are you?" "Colorado Mountains," Ryder said, "and I need you to put out the word." A pause. "How many?" Ryder looked back through the open door at Emily Carter, sitting near the stove with her tin cup in her hands, and the metal box 3 feet below the floor at her feet, and 7 months of a loan stored somewhere behind those creek water eyes. "All of them," Ryder said. "Everyone you can reach. Tell them to come ready." He hung up. The stars held. The temperature dropped. And somewhere on the road down the mountain, the machinery of something enormous and unstoppable had just been set into motion. The morning the storm finally broke, Emily made a decision. She didn't announce it. She didn't ask permission. She simply got up before the light was full worked. The plank up from the floor, took the metal box out, opened it, and began laying the contents on the floor beside the stove in a careful row. The deed, the letter, the 3 photographs, and 2 other documents Ryder hadn't noticed the first time because they had been folded small and tucked beneath everything else. Ryder was already awake. He watched her from across the room without speaking. She arranged everything with the precision of someone who had looked at these papers many times and knew exactly what each one was and where it belonged. Then she sat back on her heels and looked at the row. "My dad made copies," she said, "before he left. These are the copies, the originals he took with him." She paused. "I didn't tell you that last night." "Why not?" "Because I wasn't sure yet," she said. "Now I am." Ryder got up and crossed the room and crouched beside her. He picked up the two documents he hadn't seen before. The first was a handwritten log, dates times descriptions of activity on the land. Daniel Carter had been meticulous. Every entry had the time of day, the number of men, what equipment they'd brought, what direction they'd come from. 6 weeks of documentation starting in mid-April, 2 weeks before Margaret Carter died. He'd started watching them before his wife was gone. He'd seen this coming while he was still sitting at her bedside. Ryder set that paper down and picked up the second one. It was different from the rest, not handwritten, but printed from what looked like an old inkjet printer. It was a partial copy of a county zoning amendment. The header had been torn, so the date was missing, but the content was clear enough. A reclassification of a specific land parcel. The coordinates matched the deed from residential and agricultural use to commercial development zone, signed at the bottom by a county commissioner. The signature was Fletcher Sterling. Where did he get this? Ryder asked. He drove to the county office, Emily said, in March, before the men started coming. He said he heard something at the feed store men talking about a resort project. He went to look at the public records. She touched the corner of the printed page. This is what he found. He said it was filed 2 months before anyone told us anything, before anyone came to our door, before Mom got sick. She stopped. He thought maybe it wasn't a coincidence. Ryder looked at her. That your mother got sick. He didn't say it out loud, Emily said. He just said he thought it wasn't a coincidence, and then he stopped saying it. The room had gone quiet. Church was awake, sitting still against the far wall listening. Marco and Earl were up. Tommy and Jake hadn't moved, but by their breathing, they weren't asleep. Ryder set the paper down in the row beside the others. Emily, he said, I need to make more calls this morning, and I need to tell you something first. She looked at him. The people I called last night, he said, they're coming. More of them than you've ever seen in one place. And when they get here, things are going to move fast and get loud and look like something you've never seen before. I need to know you're ready for that. She considered it with the gravity she gave everything. Are they good people? They're my people, Ryder said, which means they're complicated. But yes, for this, yes, they're good people. Okay, she said, that's it, okay. You came in out of my door when I told you to, she said. You ate my soup and you didn't take the box. That's more than I can say for the men in the truck. She began refolding the papers with care. Okay. Church stood up and pulled his coat on. I'm going to check the bikes. Take Tommy, Pa, Ryder said. They went out, and the cold that came through the open door for those few seconds was the cold of a clearing morning, sharp but clean, not the killing cold of 2 nights before. The sky through the gap before the door closed was pale blue. Marco said, Raider, signal's going to be better this morning. I know. Ryder was already moving toward the door with his phone. He stepped outside. The landscape had changed completely from what they'd ridden through. He didn't spend time on it. He pulled up the contact he needed and called. It rang 3 times. Then Ryder, I've been waiting. The voice on the other end was a woman's low professional with the clipped efficiency of someone who billed by the hour and considered every word an expenditure. Evelyn Fitzgerald. 12 years ago, she had defended 3 of his brothers in a case that should have put them away for a decade, and she had walked them out of the courthouse on a Tuesday afternoon like she'd never had any doubt about the outcome. I need you to look up a name, Ryder said. Fletcher Sterling, County Commissioner, San Juan County, Colorado. I need everything public record filings, zoning amendments, campaign finance, property transactions in the last 3 years. A pause. He heard her writing. Timeline. I need a picture by end of day. That's aggressive. I have a child living alone on a mountain because of this man, Ryder said. Aggressive is the right word for this. Another pause longer. Send me what you have. Sending now? He took photos of the documents through the window. Emily had laid them out flat where the light hit them and sent them. There's a deputy named Barney Cross who's been doing Sterling's groundwork. He's come to the property twice with implied legal authority he may not actually have. Implied authority is a pressure tactic, Evelyn said. If he showed documentation and it was fabricated, that's a different charge. I want to know which one it is. I'll find out, she paused. How many are coming? Word traveled fast in their world. Enough, Ryder said. Don't do anything I'd have to undo. We're not starting anything, he said. We're finishing something somebody else started. He hung up and stood in the cold for a moment, looking down the valley. The road was visible now, the mountain road that wound down through the trees toward town, currently buried under 2 days of snowfall, but discernible as a depression in the white. He studied it the way you study something you know is going to be used against you. Then he went back inside. Emily had put the box away and was at the stove with her hands wrapped around the tin cup. Same position she defaulted to when she was thinking hard. Tommy and Church came back through the door behind him, stamping snow off their boots. "Bikes are okay," Church said. "Covered in snow, but okay. The tarp held on 4 of them. Jake's rear fender is going to need work." "Jake's rear fender always needs work," Marco said. "True. Road's going to be passable by this afternoon," Church added, looking at Ryder. "If the temperature keeps coming up." Ryder nodded. He sat down and looked at Emily. "Tell me about the man in the suit, everything you remember. Not just what he looked like, how he talked. What exactly he said." Emily set her cup down. When she recalled things, she went still, and her eyes moved slightly to the left, as if reading from something written in the air. He said, "This land has been zoned for commercial development under County Ordinance 14-7. Your family's residential claim has been superseded." He used the word superseded. She said it in a careful imitation of the register she'd heard it in, smooth practiced, the voice of someone used to making legal language sound like settled fact in front of people who didn't know better. And then he said there are relocation resources available through the county office for displaced residents. "Relocation resources," Marco repeated flatly. "I told him we weren't displaced," Emily said. "I told him we lived here. He said, 'Young lady, the legal reality of the situation is,' and I shut the door." "Good," Earl said. "He knocked again," Emily said. "3 times. Then I heard him talking, outside on a phone, I think, and then the truck left." She paused. "The second time he came, Deputy Cross did most of the talking. He said they would return with an eviction order. He said I had 14 days. "When was that?" Ryder asked. "October 19th, Emily said without hesitation. She had the date stored like a fact you burn into yourself because it matters. So the 14 days were up November 2nd. "It's November 14th, Church said. "I know," Emily said. "They haven't come back. I think the road got bad enough." She paused. "Or they were waiting for something." "Waiting for what?" Tommy asked. She looked at the door. "Waiting for me to give up," she said. "Or run out of food. Or just," she stopped, recalibrated. "I don't know, waiting for me to not be here anymore." The words landed in the room with the specific weight of what they actually meant, and nobody touched them. Then Church's phone buzzed. He looked at it, looked at Ryder. "They're moving." "How many?" 40 confirmed so far. "More calling in." He looked at the screen again. "Donovan's chapter is coming from Pueblo. The Mesa Verde crew is already on their way. Durango chapter said they have been sitting on it since your call last night. They were already halfway here." Ryder felt something release in his chest. The particular release that comes when the weight of a thing stops being only yours to carry. "How long?" "At the pace the road is clearing this afternoon. Maybe 4 o'clock. Emily was watching this exchange with the focused attention she gave anything that affected her situation directly. "How many is 40? She asked. "More than enough," Ryder said. "For what?" "For whatever comes next," he said. She absorbed this. Then, Deputy Cross drives a white county truck, dark blue stripe on the side. He usually comes from the south road, not the north. He has a radio, not a phone. I could hear the static when he was outside. She looked at Ryder steadily. "I thought that information might be useful." Marco made a sound. "What?" Emily said. "Nothing," Marco said. You're something else, kid. That's all." She didn't respond to that, but something in her posture shifted the microscopic shift of someone who has been told something true and is deciding where to put it. The morning moved. Church coordinated on the phone, managing the incoming convoys with the logistics efficiency that had made him road captain. Tommy and Jake cleared snow away from the bikes and got 3 of them running. The sound of the engines, when they finally turned over, was the most normal sound Ryder had heard in 2 days, and he felt something in his shoulders drop at it. Marco repaired 2 more gaps in the shack's walls that he'd identified overnight, finding materials in the lean-to with the instinct of a man who has always known how to make do. Earl stayed near Emily, not hovering, not obvious about it, just present. He found things to do in her orbit. He fixed the hinge on the wooden box so it closed cleanly. He carried water in without being asked. He talked when she wanted to talk and was quiet when she didn't. At one point, Ryder looked over and saw Emily showing Earl something in the plant book, her mother's book, pointing to a page and explaining something, and Earl was bent over the page with his enormous frame folded in on itself, listening like what she was saying was the most important information he'd received all year. Ryder turned away from that. He had a lump in his throat that he was not going to examine right now. At 11:30, Evelyn called back. "Fletcher Sterling," she said, and he could hear in her voice the particular tone of a lawyer who has found what she was looking for and is organizing it for maximum damage. 63 years old, county commissioner for 11 years. Prior to that, private commercial development, primarily land acquisition in rural Colorado. In the last 3 years, he has been associated with a development group called Summit Ridge Properties. Not publicly, the connection is through a shell company, but it's there if you know where to look, and I know where to look. "What's the project?" "A 400-acre luxury resort development," Evelyn said. "Total projected value $340 million. Anchored by a parcel of land currently listed in county records as disputed residential, which matches the coordinates you sent me." "Emily's land." "Emily's land," Evelyn confirmed. "The zoning amendment your contact filed was done procedurally but incorrectly. There are 3 violations of the public notice requirement alone. The family was never formally notified. The comment period was never opened. If this had gone to challenge, it would have been thrown out." "They were counting on no challenge," Ryder said. "They were counting on an 8-year-old with no legal representation and no family." "That appears to be the strategy, yes." A pause. "Ryder, Deputy Cross, I ran him too. He is a commissioned deputy. His authority is real. But the eviction documentation he brought to the property, I need to see it. But based on what you're describing, it almost certainly wasn't filed through proper judicial process. A valid eviction order requires a court filing. A deputy can't generate one on a commissioner's authority." "So he was bluffing." "He was representing a legal document that may not exist," Evelyn said carefully, "which is a different thing from bluffing in terms of what it costs him." "Are you coming?" "I'm already in my car," she said. Ryder stood in the snow for a moment after he hung up. Then he went back in barn and told Emily everything, all of it, in plain language, the way she'd asked to be treated. She listened without interrupting. When he finished, she was quiet for 20 seconds. "They made up paperwork," she said. "Probably. To scare me off my own land." "Yes." She looked at the floor. Her jaw worked once. Then she looked up. "My dad documented everything from the beginning. He knew." "He knew," Ryder said, "and he made sure you'd have what you needed. He went to get help and—" She stopped. Her voice had thinned by a fraction. She pulled it back. "He didn't know I'd be getting this kind of help." "No," Ryder said quietly. "He couldn't have known that." Emily pressed her lips together. She nodded once, the nod of someone filing a thing away where they can deal with it later when the current situation is handled. "What happens this afternoon?" she asked. Ryder started to answer. Then Church's voice cut through from outside, sharp carrying. "Ryder, South Road." Ryder was through this door in 4 seconds. He stood in the cold and looked where Church was looking down the valley, the South Road, where a white county truck with a dark blue stripe was moving slowly through the snow, still a distance away, but absolutely recognizable. Behind it, barely visible, a second vehicle. Something larger. Something with a diesel engine sound that carried even this far. A truck with equipment on it. Emily had come out behind him. She stood at his shoulder. He hadn't heard her come through the door. She moved that quietly, and she looked at the South Road, and he felt rather than saw the way she went still. "That's his truck," she said. Flat, certain. "I know. He brought something with him this time." Her voice didn't waver, but her hand, small, cold, without gloves, found the sleeve of his leather vest and held it. Not clutching, just contact. The way you reach for something solid when the ground shifts. Ryder put his hand over hers for 1 second. Then he straightened. "Church," he said. "Yeah. How far out are our people?" Church was already on the phone. He held up 3 fingers without looking up from the screen. 3 hours. Ryder did the math. Cross was 20 minutes away. Their backup was 3 hours out, which meant for the next 3 hours, it was just them. "Get the bikes running," Ryder said. "All of them. And get Emily back inside." "I'm not going inside," Emily said. "Emily." It's my land, she said. Her voice was 8 years old and 40 years old at the same time. I'm not going inside. He looked at her. She looked at the white truck coming up the South Road. Stay behind me, he said. Okay, she said, and she meant it as a tactic, not a concession. The truck kept coming. The diesel sound behind it grew louder, and Ryder Callahan stood in the snow on an 8-year-old girl's land with 5 of his brothers behind him and 3 hours between now and the moment everything would change, and he planted his feet and did not move an inch. Deputy Barney Cross stepped out of the white truck like a man who had practiced looking certain and had gotten pretty good at it. He was somewhere in his mid-40s, thick through the middle, with the kind of face that had probably been unremarkable even when it was young. He wore his uniform like it was the most important thing about him, which Ryder suspected it was. Behind him, the diesel engine cut off, and 2 men climbed down from the cab of the equipment truck. Laborers hire the kind of men who show up and do a job and don't ask what they're building on top of. The bulldozer on the trailer behind them was yellow and new. Cross looked at Ryder. He looked at Church Marco Earl. Tommy Jake, all of them lined up, all of them still. All of them watching him with the specific quality of attention that 6 men who have nothing to prove give to a situation they've already decided how to handle. He looked at the 3 bikes idling, exhaust rising in the cold air. Then he looked at Emily standing behind Ryder's left shoulder, exactly where she'd said she'd be, and something in his expression shifted a recalibration fast and not quite hidden. He hadn't expected her to have company. He covered it. He put on a flat official expression and walked forward until he was 15 feet away and stopped. I'm Deputy Cross, San Juan County Sheriff's Department. He pulled a folded document from his jacket. I have an eviction and demolition order for this property filed under county ordinance. What court? Ryder said. Cross stopped. Excuse me, which court filed that order? Ryder's voice was level and quiet, not hostile, just precise. A valid eviction order requires a judicial filing. I'm asking which court and which judge signed it. Cross's jaw moved once. This is a county administrative order. That's not a court, Ryder said. Sir, I don't know who you are, but this is a legal proceeding and I am a commissioned law enforcement officer. And this is private property belonging to Emily Carter, whose parents' names are on the deed registered with this county. Ryder crossed his arms. So unless you have a court order signed by a judge, you're trespassing. The word landed. Cross's face went through several things in quick succession: surprise, calculation, anger, and then the particular flatness of a man deciding to push anyway, because backing down in front of witnesses costs him something he can't afford. The child does not have legal standing to— I do. The voice came from behind Ryder from the direction of the road. Everyone turned. Evelyn Fitzgerald was walking through the snow in heeled boots with the confidence of a woman who had walked into harder rooms than this and hadn't lost yet. She was 60, trim gray-haired, and she carried a briefcase like it was a weapon she was comfortable using. She'd made better time than Ryder expected. She stopped beside Ryder and looked across with the expression of a lawyer who has already read the file. Evelyn Fitzgerald, she said to Cross, I'm representing Emily Carter's interest in this matter. I'd like to see the filing documentation for that order. Cross looked at her. He looked at Ryder. He held out the folded document. Evelyn took it, opened it, read it. She read it for 30 seconds, which was longer than it should have taken for a single page. The length of that silence was itself a communication. She looked up. This is a county administrative notice, she said. It references Ordinance 14-7, which was itself improperly filed. The public notice requirements were not met, and the affected landowner was never formally served. She folded it and held it back out toward Cross, and the gesture was as clean a dismissal as Ryder had ever seen. This document has no legal force. You have no authority to demolish or evict on this property today. Cross did not take the document back. Ma'am, attorney, Evelyn said pleasantly. Attorney, this matter has been resolved at the county level. My authority— Your authority derives from the sheriff's department, not from Commissioner Sterling's office, she said. And I would strongly recommend you consider carefully what you're doing here before you take another step forward, because the documentation I have in this case includes evidence of systematic fraudulent misrepresentation of legal authority, witness intimidation of a minor, and improper zoning amendments that will be in front of a federal judge within 72 hours. That last word, federal, hit Cross like a change in air pressure. Ryder watched his face and saw the moment the man understood that what he'd walked into today was not what he'd been told it would be. "I'm going to need to make a call," Cross said. "Make as many as you like," Evelyn said. Cross retreated to his truck. The two laborers stood by the equipment trailer and looked at each other and looked at the ground and said nothing. Emily had moved up from behind Ryder's shoulder to beside him, and she was watching Cross with the steady attention of someone keeping track of something. "That's his tell," she said quietly to Ryder. "What is—" "When he doesn't know what to do, he goes to the truck," she said. "He did it both times before. He gets in and makes a call, and then comes back different. Whatever the person on the phone says is what he does next." Ryder looked at her. "You watched him that carefully." "I had nothing else to do," she said simply. Church was at Ryder's other shoulder. "Sterling's going to tell him to push through anyway," he said under his breath. "He's committed too much. He can't pull back now." "I know," Ryder said. "Our people are 2 hours out." 2 hours was a long time with a bulldozer on a trailer 20 feet away and a deputy on the phone with a corrupt county commissioner. Evelyn stepped on close. "I've already filed an emergency injunction request with the federal district court in Denver. I called it in from the car. It won't be granted for hours, but the filing is on record." She lowered her voice. "Which means anything he does to this property from this moment forward is happening after his principals had legal notice." "Will that stop him?" "No," she said. "But it will bury them." She paused. "Ryder, I need to tell you something. When I was pulling Sterling's records this morning, I found something I didn't expect." She opened her briefcase and took out a single printed page and held it where he could see it without handing it over. "There's a missing persons report in the county system. Filed in June, a man named Daniel Carter reported missing by a gas station attendant in Pagosa Springs, who said a man matching his description left his truck at the station and never came back for it." Everything stopped. Ryder heard it, processed it, looked at Evelyn, who looked back at him with the careful expression of a person delivering information that has a sharp edge on one side. "The report was filed," she said, "but the investigation, such as it was handled by the county sheriff's office." She paused deliberately. "The same office Deputy Cross works for." Ryder was completely still. "The investigation was closed in 3 weeks," Evelyn said. "Classified as a voluntary disappearance. No follow-up." She folded the page. "I've already sent this to the FBI field office in Denver along with the rest of the package." "Emily," Ryder said. Emily looked up at him. "Your father," he said, and then stopped because there was no clean way to say the next part and no version of it that didn't change what she was carrying. "They found his truck," Emily said. Her voice was absolutely level. He stared at her. "I heard you talking to someone this morning," she said. "On the phone, you said Pagosa Springs. My dad talked about a gas station there. He said he'd stop there first if he could make it to the main road." She looked at the middle distance. "I've known since June that if he was okay, he would have found a way to get word back. He would have sent someone." She came back to Ryder's face. "I've known for a long time." There was nothing he could say to that. He didn't try. He put his hand on her shoulder, just set it there steady, and she stood straight under it and didn't pull away. Cross got back out of his truck. He walked forward. He had the expression of a man who had received his orders and was committed to them and was not going to think about it any harder than that. "I've been instructed that this eviction proceeds today under county authority," Cross said. "I'm asking you to step away from the property." "You're making a serious mistake," Evelyn said. "Ma'am." "Attorney," she said, same pleasant tone as before. "Attorney, step away from the property or I'll be forced to detain you for obstruction." The two men by the equipment truck exchanged another look. The older one started moving toward the trailer, reached for the tie-down on the bulldozer. What happened next happened fast. Earl said no and stepped forward, and the laborer stopped, and the tone of that single word from a man Earl's size in a moment like that required no elaboration. The laborer stepped back. Cross's hand moved toward his radio. "Go ahead," Ryder said. "Call whoever you need to call." Cross keyed the radio, said his badge number, the address, requested backup. His voice was steady, but his eyes were moving too much, checking the bikes, checking the menu mile, checking the road. Ryder looked at the road too, and heard it before he saw it. A sound that started as a vibration low in building felt in the sternum before the ears caught it fully. The specific layered rumble of many engines working together, not the random sound of traffic, but the organized sound of formation, a single moving thing made of many parts, all of them synchronous, all of them pointed in the same direction. Cross heard it too. He stopped talking into his radio. The first riders came over the ridge to the north. Not 40, not 60. The count had been climbing all morning through churches' phone chapters, calling in individuals, calling in men who had heard through the network that Ryder Callahan was on a mountain with a child who needed help and had said, "Come ready." They came in formation, headlights on in the mid-morning light, the column stretching back over the ridge, and still coming, the sound of it filling the valley from wall to wall. 150 riders. They came down the road and fanned out along the perimeter of Emily's land without being directed, organizing by instinct and experience, into a line that curved around the property, like a wall bike's lined up engines, idling men sitting still and watching. The sound when they all cut engines simultaneously was a silence that was louder than the engines had been. 150 men. Leather vests, road miles, gray beards, and young faces in every kind of American face, in between all of them, looking at Cross and the white truck and the yellow bulldozer on the trailer. Cross had not moved. He was standing with his radio in his hand and his mouth slightly open, and the expression of a man doing rapid arithmetic and not liking the answer. A rider broke from the formation and came forward. Ryder recognized him before he got close. Donovan Briggs, president of the Pueblo chapter, 60 years old, iron gray hair, a face like a topographical map of every hard decision he'd ever made. He stopped his bike 10 feet from Ryder and cut the engine and swung off. "Ryder," he said, "Donovan." Donovan looked at Cross. He looked at the bulldozer. He looked at Emily standing at Ryder's side. He looked back at Ryder with a question in his expression. 8 years old, Ryder said, alone out here since June. Her father's missing. This man came to tear down her house. Donovan turned his head and looked at Cross for a long, unhurried moment. "Deputy," Donovan said. His voice was conversational and absolutely without threat, which was somehow more effective than threat would have been. "You should call your boss." Cross was already on the phone. He'd stopped using the radio. Evelyn was beside Ryder. "That call," she said quietly, "is going to Sterling, and Sterling is going to realize in approximately the next 60 seconds that a federal attorney has filed documentation in Denver on this case. The two things together." She left it there. "Will he run?" Ryder asked. "If he's smart," she said. "But if he were smart, he wouldn't have done any of this." Emily had been watching the riders. All 150 of them spread along her land in a line that said mine as clearly as any deed could. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said to no one in particular, "They all came." Earl was close enough to hear it. He said, "Every one." She turned and looked at him. "Because of me, because of you," Earl said. Cross came back. He looked diminished, not smaller exactly, but the performance of certainty he'd arrived with had dissolved, and what was left was a middle-aged man in a uniform standing in the snow, realizing the ground had shifted in every direction at once. He looked at Ryder. He looked at Evelyn. "I've been instructed to—" He stopped, started again. "I'm going to need to consult further with—" He stopped again. "Deputy," Evelyn said, and her voice had changed now. No longer pleasant, entirely professional, with the weight of someone who has counted her cards and knows she has them all. "I need you to understand your situation clearly. The documentation I've filed contains evidence linking Commissioner Sterling to a fraudulent zoning amendment, improper use of county law enforcement resources for private commercial purposes, and this is the part you should pay particular attention to: potential obstruction of a missing persons investigation involving the father of this child." She let that land. "Every action you take from this moment forward is being observed by 150 witnesses. I would recommend very strongly that you stand down." Cross looked at the bulldozer. He looked at the two laborers who had quietly moved away from the equipment trailer and were standing near the cab of the truck in the posture of men who have decided they are done with today. He looked at Emily. Whatever happened in his face when he looked at her, it wasn't readable. But when he looked away from her, something had changed. "I'm standing down," he said, pending further consultation. He walked back to his truck and got in. The laborers got in without being told. The truck turned around slowly in the snow and the equipment trailer behind it with the yellow bulldozer, and they drove back down the south road. Nobody cheered. Nobody said anything for a moment. Emily watched the truck until it was gone. Then she looked at the line of riders along her land, all of them still there, engines cold watching. And she looked at the shack behind her, the thin walls that had held through a mountain winter, the single window with the wavy glass her father had put in himself, even though he wasn't a carpenter. She turned and looked at Ryder. "Is it over?" she asked. "This part," he said. She understood what that meant. "There's more. Sterling isn't going to go quietly," he said. "He has too much at stake. He's going to try something else." He paused. "But he's going to have to try it against a federal filing 150 witnesses and an attorney who has been watching his paperwork fall apart all morning." He looked at her. "You have a stronger hand than he does now." She absorbed this, turned it over. "Because of the box," she said. "Because your father kept records," Ryder said. "Because you kept them safe, because you stayed." She looked at the shack again, at the plank floor she'd lifted every few days to make sure the box was still there, at the third plank from the left of the stove. "I told myself if I left, there'd be nothing left to come back to," she said. "My dad knew where we were. If he came back," she stopped. She'd said before that she knew. She did know. But knowing something and releasing it were different operations, and they happened on different timelines. "I wanted there to be something to come back to." Ryder didn't say anything. Donovan had come to stand on Ryder's other side, and the three of them, the girl, the enforcer, the chapter president, stood looking at the shack that shouldn't have survived and had anyway, because an 8-year-old girl with a dead mother and a missing father and 7 cans of food and her mother's plant book in a metal box under the third plank from the left had decided it was going to. Church's phone buzzed. He answered it, listened, looked up. "Evelyn," he said, "your contact in Denver." Evelyn took the phone and walked several steps away. She listened. She said 3 words, all of them yes, and came back with the expression of someone receiving news they expected and are glad about but are too professional to celebrate loudly. "The FBI field office has opened a formal investigation," she said. "Based on the package I sent, they're issuing a hold on all county administrative actions affecting this property pending review." She looked at Emily. "Nobody is touching this land." Emily's face didn't break open. She didn't cry or collapse or make a sound. She just closed her eyes for 1 single second, and in that second, Ryder saw what 7 months of holding everything upright cost a person, even an 8-year-old person, with more spine than most men he'd known. She opened her eyes. "Okay," she said, and then quieter almost to herself. "Okay, Dad." Somewhere down the south road, a white county truck was driving toward a phone call that Fletcher Sterling was not going to enjoy. And in the valley, 150 men sat on their bikes in the mountain cold and held the line around a piece of land that belonged to a girl who had earned it the hardest way there was. Ryder looked at Donovan. Donovan looked at the shack. "She needs a real roof," Donovan said. "I know," Ryder said. "We've got people who can do that." "I know that too." Donovan nodded once the knot of a thing decided. He turned and walked back toward the riders. Ryder heard him talking, his voice carrying without effort over the cold air, and he didn't need to hear the specific words to know what was being organized. Emily looked up at Ryder. "What are they doing?" "He's deciding what comes next," he said. She looked at the riders, at the formation that had come over the ridge an hour ago and hadn't left. "Nobody ever came before," she said. Not an accusation, not even sadness exactly, just the plain statement of a fact she'd been carrying alone for a long time. "When I needed help, nobody came." Ryder looked at her. "We came," he said. She looked up at him with those creek water eyes, and this time what was in them wasn't the lockdown assessment of a child who had learned to trust nothing. This time there was something else fragile, real, and exactly the size of the hope that survives in a person when everything else has been stripped away and they've held on anyway. "You came in out of a blizzard," she said. "That's how it usually starts," Ryder said. Donovan came back 20 minutes later with a list in his head and a look on his face that Ryder recognized, the look of a man who has converted a problem into a project and is already 3 steps into execution. "We got 4 guys with construction background," he said. 2 carpenters, 1 electrician, 1 who spent 8 years doing roofing in Wyoming. Sal's got a truck with tools. Mesa Verde crew stopped at the hardware store in town on the way up. Church called ahead. He looked at the shack. "We can have a real roof on that by tomorrow afternoon. Insulation in the walls by nightfall. She won't be burning furniture to stay warm." "She was burning furniture," Tommy said from behind Ryder. Nobody answered that. Emily was standing close enough to hear all of it. She was doing the things she did when information was coming too fast and too big, going very still, processing from the inside out, her face neutral while her eyes worked. "You don't have to do that," she said to Donovan. "I know," he said. He looked at her the way Earl had been looking at her since the first morning, like something that required a particular kind of care, the kind you give things that have survived on their own for too long and don't know yet how to let someone else carry part of the weight. "We want to." She looked at the shack. The walls her father had built badly on purpose, he'd said, because he wasn't a carpenter, and if you looked at the corners, you could tell. She looked at them for a long moment. "Don't change the corners," she said. Donovan looked at her. "My dad built it," she said. "I want it to still be the thing my dad built. Just warmer." Donovan said, "We'll work around the corners." She nodded once, settled. Ryder's phone rang. He stepped away to take it. The voice on the other end was a man named Reyes, not Marco, a different Reyes who worked with a contact at the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and called Ryder once every few years when something needed to be set off the record. "Your attorney friend lit a fire," Reyes said without greeting. "FBI opened formally this morning like she told you. But there's more. Sterling, he moved money this morning. Wire transfer account in the Caymans, triggered a flag." Ryder stopped walking. "He's running. He's trying to. Colorado State Police have been looped in. I don't think he makes it to the airport." A pause. "And there's one more thing. Cross the deputy. He went back to the county office this morning and spent 40 minutes in the records room. Security camera caught him removing files. Destroying evidence. Attempting to. The FBI was already pulling digital records from the county server remotely. Hard copies were the only thing left that could have helped him." A pause with weight in it. "They picked him up in the parking lot. He's in custody." Ryder stood in the snow and let that settle. Then the missing persons file on Daniel Carter. A longer pause. "That's the part I wanted to tell you carefully," Reyes said. "The FBI pulled the original file. The investigation, what there was of it, was closed by Cross personally. He signed the closure form. The basis he cited was that Carter had a history of abandoning family obligations." Another pause. "There was no such history. Cross manufactured the justification." Ryder turned and looked at Emily, who was 20 feet away watching the first group of riders who'd been designated for construction work begin unloading tools from Sal's truck. She was watching them with her arms folded across her chest and her chin slightly up, the posture she used when something was happening around her that she was deciding how to feel about. "Is there anything on where Carter actually is?" Ryder said into the phone. "The truck was found at the Pagosa Springs station like the report said. No other physical evidence. But," Reyes chose his words, "there's a storage unit in Pagosa Springs registered to a name that's a shell, rented in late May. The FBI is executing a search warrant on it this afternoon." A pause. "Whatever he found and documented before he left, he may have sent copies somewhere safe before his truck ended up at that gas station. We'll know more by tonight." Ryder thanked him and hung up. He stood still for a moment, calculating what to carry to Emily right now and what to hold until there was something more solid to hand her. The storage unit, the search warrant, the possibility, small but real, that Daniel Carter had been more prepared than even his metal box under the floor revealed. He decided to tell her all of it, because she'd earned it and because withholding things from her had never once been the right call. He walked back to where she was standing and said, "I need to tell you some things. Some of them are good and some of them I don't know yet." She turned from the construction activity and looked at him. He told her about Cross, the custody, the records room, the manufactured closure on her father's case. He watched her face when he said Cross had falsified the investigation. Her jaw tightened and a color came into her face, not grief, but anger, clear the anger of someone who has suspected the worst and is receiving confirmation. "He lied," she said, "about my dad." "Yes." "So no one looked for him, because Cross said not to." "Yes." She was quiet for 6 full seconds. "And now?" "The FBI is looking," he said. "There's a storage unit in Pagosa Springs that may have more of what your father documented. They're searching it today." He watched her process that, the fragile and dangerous hope of it, the thing that could be a door or a wall, depending on what was behind it, and there was no way to know yet. "He was careful," she said finally. "My dad, he was always more careful than he seemed." She paused. He would have made copies, more copies than the box. He would have left a trail. She said it like she was convincing herself and succeeding. He was careful. The FBI thinks so too, Ryder said, or they wouldn't have the warrant. She nodded. The nod was controlled, and what it was controlling was something large and barely contained. She turned back to the construction activity because she needed somewhere to put her eyes that wasn't his face right now. Okay, she said. Okay. Ryder gave her the space of it and went to find Evelyn. Evelyn was on her phone as she had been on and off all morning, building the legal framework around Emily's situation with the systematic efficiency of a person laying a foundation. Each call, another stone. Each piece of documentation, another layer. She held up one finger when she saw Ryder coming and finished her call before she spoke. Sterling's in custody, she said before he could tell her. My contact at the U.S. Attorney's office called 10 minutes ago. The wire transfer was the nail they had been looking for a financial move, and he handed it to them. She allowed herself a small, precise smile. He's being charged federally. The county charges will layer on top. His legal team is going to be busy for a long time. What does Emily's situation look like, Ryder said, legally, right now? Evelyn opened her briefcase and took out a legal pad covered in her handwriting. The federal injunction protecting the property is holding. The fraudulent zoning amendment will be officially voided within 72 hours. I have confirmation from the county attorney's office, who is very eager to cooperate now that Sterling is not in a position to make their life difficult. She paused. Emily's ownership of the land is not in question. The deed is clean, the title is clear. What she needs now is legal guardianship while her father's situation is being investigated. I was going to ask about that. I've already started the paperwork, Evelyn said. There's a woman in Durango, Maria Sandoval. She does child welfare advocacy. I've worked with her before. She can be appointed emergency guardian in the interim. She's good. Emily will be safe, and she won't be moved from the property. Evelyn met his eyes. I want to be clear about that last part. Nobody is taking Emily off that land. She'll want to hear that herself, Ryder said. Then let's tell her. They walked back to where Emily was. The construction team was already at work. Ryder could hear the sound of it, purposeful and organized, the thunk of tools, and the low directive voices of men who knew what they were doing. Emily was watching from a few feet away, and beside her, Earl had resumed his position, present, steady, not quite hovering. Evelyn crouched down to Emily's level, which Ryder noticed, and which was the right instinct. Emily, she said, we want to tell you exactly where things stand. Is that okay? Emily looked at her. Yes. Your land is safe, Evelyn said. The men who tried to take it are being arrested today. The legal order that said they could demolish this property is being thrown out. Nobody can touch this land. She paused. Your dad's name is on the deed. Your mom's name is on the deed. And until your dad comes home, your name will be on it too. I'm going to make sure of that personally. Emily was very still. Until he comes home, she said. Until he comes home, Evelyn said, without flinching and without false comfort. The words meant exactly what they said, a possibility held open, not a promise beyond what the evidence allowed. Emily looked at the land around her, at the riders who were still there, many of them, though some had been organized into the work crew. At the shack her father's hands had made. At the third plank from the left of the stove, invisible from here, but exactly where it had always been. My mom is buried here, Emily said. It was the first time she'd said it to anyone. On the east side, my dad made a marker. She paused. That's the other reason I couldn't leave. Nobody said anything for a moment. Then Evelyn said quietly, nobody's going to touch that either. Emily closed her eyes, opened them. Okay, she said, and this time the word had a different quality than all the previous times she'd said it, not the braced okay of someone absorbing bad news, not the tactical okay of someone accepting a plan. This was a different weight entirely. The okay of someone who has been holding a door shut against everything that wanted in and is for the first time considering the possibility of letting go of the handle. The afternoon moved fast after that. Church coordinated the construction with Donovan, and Ryder stayed close to Emily without making it a surveillance. He was near, she knew he was near, and that was enough. Evelyn made calls. The FBI called Evelyn. The county attorney's office called Evelyn twice. Maria Sandoval in Durango called, and Evelyn handed the phone to Emily, And Ryder watched Emily talk to a woman she'd never met with. The careful assessment she gave, everything listening, measuring, asking one direct question that he couldn't hear from where he was standing. When she handed the phone back to Evelyn, her expression had settled. "She sounds okay," Emily said. "She is so," Evelyn said. "She's going to come meet you tomorrow." Okay. At 3:15 in the afternoon, Reyes called back. Ryder took it 10 steps from the group. "Tell me," he said. "Storage unit in Pagosa Springs," Reyes said. "FBI executed the warrant an hour ago. Inside, they found a fireproof lockbox. Inside the lockbox, documents. A lot of documents. Original signed copies of everything in that metal box under the floor, plus more communications between Sterling and Summit Ridge Properties going back 2 years, including 2 emails that are going to be significant in the federal case." A pause. And a letter addressed to Emily, dated June 3rd. Ryder's hand tightened it on the phone. "Daniel Carter left that unit stocked and locked before he went to the gas station," Reyes said. "He knew he was walking into something dangerous. He documented everything, he had locked it somewhere it couldn't be touched, and then he went anyway." The pause that followed had the weight of a man choosing how to say the next part. "He didn't come back from that gas station, Ryder. I think you and I both know what that probably means." Ryder stood in the cold with the phone against his ear and looked at Emily across the distance between them, small, straight-backed, watching the men work on her father's shack with her arms at her sides and her chin level. "The letter," he said. "FBI will release it to her guardian as soon as guardianship is established. Shouldn't be more than 24 hours. A pause. He was trying to protect her, Ryder. Right up to the end. He walked straight into whatever was waiting for him, and he made sure she'd have everything she needed before he did. "I know," Ryder said. "She's going to be okay." Ryder watched her. "Yeah," he said. "She's going to be okay." He hung up and stood still for a moment, doing the work of holding what he now knew and what she would need to know, and the gap between now and the right time to tell her. Daniel Carter had known. He'd prepared everything and walked forward anyway for his daughter, for the land, for the woman buried on the east side with a marker he had made himself. He'd been a man who did what needed doing, even when what needed doing was going to cost him everything. Apple didn't fall far. Ryder walked back. The twist of the afternoon came not from Sterling's camp, but from a phone call Evelyn took at 4 o'clock that changed the shape of what came next. She listened, said nothing for an unusual length of time, then said, "Hold on," and came straight to Ryder. "Summit Ridge Properties," she said. Her voice had the controlled electricity of someone delivering information that reorganizes everything. My contact pulled the full corporate structure. Shell company, holding company, and at the end of the chain, there's a silent partner. She looked at him. "A state senator, James Corbin, 3rd District." Ryder went very still. "This isn't county corruption," Evelyn said. "This is a state-level land acquisition operation using county infrastructure as the mechanism. Sterling was the local face, but Corbin was the money and the protection." She paused. "Which means the FBI's scope just expanded significantly." "It also means," Ryder said slowly, "that Sterling wasn't just some local developer who got greedy. He was a component," Evelyn said, "part of a larger operation. There may be other properties, other families." They looked at each other. "Emily was not the only one," Ryder said. "I don't think so," Evelyn said, "but she's going to be the reason the whole thing comes down." He looked at her, 8 years old, standing in the cold air near the shack where her mother's plant book was still on the shelf, and the metal box was still under the floor, and the corners her father had built badly were still exactly where they'd always been. He walked over to her. She looked up. "I need to tell you one more thing," he said. "Is it bad?" she said. "Parts of it." She straightened her shoulders. "Tell me." He told her about her father, the storage unit, the lockbox, the letter. He told her carefully the way you tell a person something enormous, with all the words in the right order and none of them softened beyond recognition. He told her that her father had known, that he'd prepared everything before he walked into it, that there was a letter with her name on it that she would have in her hands within a day. She listened without moving. When he finished, she was quiet for a long time. "He knew he might not come back," she said. "Yes." "And he went anyway." "Yes." She looked at the east side of the property, the direction she'd said without saying what direction it was. "He went to protect me," she said. "And Mom." A pause. "The land." "All of it," Ryder said. She pressed her lips together hard. Her eyes went bright and she held it the way she held everything, with a grip that should have been impossible in someone her size, until she decided what to do with it. Then she let out one long breath, slow and controlled. "He was brave," she said. "He was," Ryder said. "Like you," she said, "coming in out of the storm, even when you didn't know what it was going to cost." Ryder didn't have an answer to that. He sat with it. The sun dropped behind the ridge by 5 and the temperature went with it, but the shack had a new roof by then. Real roofing material properly secured the gaps in the walls, packed with insulation that the electrician had sourced from town. One of the Carpenter brothers had found the structural weakness in the east wall and reinforced it without changing how it looked from the outside. The wood stove was burning clean and hot, and somebody Ryder didn't see who had brought up 3 boxes of food from the supply run and stacked them inside near the door. Emily walked through the shack when the crew finished touching the walls, the new ceiling around the window. She stopped at the stove and put her hand near it and felt the heat come off it properly, the way heat was supposed to come off a stove when the walls around it were doing their job. She went to the 3rd plank from the left, worked it up. The box was there. She put the plank back down and stood up. "It's still the same house," she said to the room in general, to Donovan, to Ryder, to the men who'd done the work. "Yes," Donovan said, "just better." She looked at the corners, still crooked, still exactly as her father's hands had left them, just better. As the evening gathered, the riders who'd held the perimeter all day began the process of leaving in groups, the Mesa Verde crew first, then Pueblo, then the others in rotating departure, each group stopping to say something to Emily before they went. She stood at the door of the shack and received each farewell with the same directness she'd given everything else, looking at the person listening, responding in her own plain language. An older rider, someone Ryder didn't know well, a man from the Durango chapter with 40 years on his face, stopped in front of her and took off his vest patch. Not the whole vest, just a small secondary patch, a simple enamel pin, and held it out to her. "For the bravest person I met this year," he said. She looked at it, looked at him. "I was just surviving," she said. "That's what brave is," he said. She took it. She held it in her palm and looked at it for a moment, and then she closed her fingers around it. By the time the last of the formation had gone back over the ridge, it was full dark and cold and clear, and the valley was quiet in the way that valleys get after something large has moved through them, a quality of air that's been changed and knows it. Ryder and Church and Earl and Marco stayed. Tommy and Jake stayed. Nobody had discussed it. It simply wasn't time to go yet, and everyone understood that. Emily sat near the stove with the enamel pin in her open palm, looking at it. Earl was beside her, his legs too long for the floor space, not caring. Evelyn was at the wooden crate writing on her legal pad by the light of the lamp. Church was near the door, quiet. Marco had found a loose floorboard near the back wall and was fixing it because it was there to fix. "Evelyn," Emily said. Evelyn looked up. "The other families," Emily said. "The ones you think were in other properties. Do you know how to find them?" Evelyn looked at her for a moment. "We're working on it. Because if my dad documented his land," Emily said, "maybe they documented theirs too." She was looking at the enamel pin. "Maybe they have boxes under their floors." The room went quiet enough that the stove ticking was the loudest sound. "That's a good thought," Evelyn said carefully. "If I can help," Emily said, "when I'm older, or I don't know how legal things work, but if there's something I can do." Evelyn set her pen down. "Emily, the testimony of the person at the center of this case, even documented testimony, even now, is going to be significant in what happens to Sterling and Corbin." She paused. "You're already helping." Emily closed her fingers around the pin again, nodded once. Ryder looked at her, this child who had survived a mountain alone for 7 months, who had opened her door to 6 frozen strangers and saved their lives with her last can of soup, who had kept a metal box safe under a floorboard while men came to take everything her family had built, who had stood outside her own shack and watched a bulldozer arrive and not moved 1 inch from the ground she was standing on. He looked at her and felt the thing in his chest that he'd never found the right name for, and he understood now that it didn't need a name. Some things you just carried. "Ryder," she said without looking up. "Yeah." "Will you come back?" She said it plainly, the way she asked everything. No manipulation, no performance. Just the direct question of someone who has learned that asking plainly is the most efficient way to find out what you need to know. He thought about all the right careful answers, all the honest hedges about distance and road and the nature of the life he lived. Yes, he said. She looked up at him then, creekwater eyes clear as the first night she'd held the candle up in the storm and looked at 6 men she didn't know and made a decision. Okay, she said, and this time there was no weight in it, no bracing, no controlled calculation. Just the simple okay of a child who has decided to believe something and means it. At dawn the next morning, the remaining bikes lined up for departure. Emily stood in the doorway of the shack and watched them get ready. The air was cold and clean, and the sky to the east was going pink at the edge, the kind of morning that announces itself. Ryder stopped in front of her last. Maria Sandoval will be here by noon, he said. Evelyn will be back by end of week with paperwork. The FBI will call when they have news. He paused. You're not alone in any of this. You understand that. Not one piece of it. She looked up at him. I know, she said. Do you actually know, or are you saying it? The corner of her mouth moved. I actually know. He held out his hand. She looked at it, and then she shook it. Formal firm, the grip of someone who understood exactly what the gesture meant. He walked to his bike, swung on, looked back once. She was still in the doorway, the pink morning light behind her, the enamel pin in her hand, standing straight on the land that belonged to her family and always had and always would. The engines turned over. The formation rolled down the north road away from the valley, back toward the world that was waiting for them. And Emily Carter stood on her land and watched them go, and she did not look small, and she was not afraid, and she was not alone. She had survived the storm. She had held the line. She had saved 6 men who came back and saved her right back. She had kept the box safe, and the land safe, and her mother's grave, and her father's memory, and the crooked corners he'd built with his own hands, and the world now knew her name. She was 8 years old, and she had already done the hardest thing she would ever do, and she had done it without flinching. And the land beneath her feet was hers and nobody. Not Sterling, not Cross, not any man with a suit and a bulldozer, and manufactured paperwork was ever going to take it from her again.